station manager here, Hal Weston, he'd been to the BBC and he thought a natural history unit would be really good jam on the top of his bread and butter of studio shows, while Play School and Spot On being two of them. And so my mate Bob Brown and myself, he was the cameraman, I was the reporter, sort of director, and we talked to Hal. We wrote to the BBC and said, we can make you some documentaries, you know, knowing nothing about production. And Dave wrote back very encouragingly, but Hal, the manager, then got the okay from on high to start a little unit. Brought in the first producer, I was a director, Bob was the camera, Robin Scholes of Once for Warriors fame, she was the other director. And so we got rolling. Graham Wilson was the producer, and we made the first little series on air was Hidden Places, which were 15-minute films, won an award with one of them, and we were working on other documentaries, longer form documentaries that will become the Wild South series. The first challenge was that the executives in Auckland didn't understand why we didn't have something ready to go to air within a few months. And despite Graham Wilson, the producer, telling them, these films take a year to film and then you're editing. But they were impatient. I think the Truth newspaper started to stir around saying a lot of money's being spent, public money's being spent, you know, and where is it? And so that's why we made the 15-minute pieces. And then that kind of quietened everything down. They saw we were producing something, and so we got space to make the Wild South shows. Wild South was really conceived as a copy of the classic BBC documentaries, voiceover, voice of God, and observation of animal behaviour and ecology, occasionally scientists in the story, and we just took the most sort of important and dramatic stories of New Zealand wildlife. So Takahe, which is one of the news stories I had done some years before, was one of the first Wild South that I did. Michael Stedman came in, brought in Rod Morris and Peter Hayden. So we were like the second iteration of the Natural History Unit. Rod made Black Stilt. We made a kakapo film. So there was a lot of the New Zealand endangered species. And then they were popular. They rated really well. They started to sell overseas, and so we kind of got momentum going. We stayed on Enderby Island in the Aucklands group for 3 months. So we took prefabricated huts with us. We took all of the food equipment we needed, radios to communicate here, a wind-powered generator, a freezer for the scientist specimens. So there was 3 of us in the film crew and 3 people doing the science, mainly with the sea lions. That was an intense film we made with the BBC. They sent an editor to New Zealand and he cut the film for us. We sucked on his brains, his knowledge of, and he was incredible, so quick. You know, days of film, you were hanging up pegs of film for a sequence, and he'd hardly even look at it. He would just hold it to the light. Oh yeah, I'll put that there, and then he would bang it together, and it would work. It was uncanny to live in the wilds, sometimes with storms lashing across the top of the island. The island was only a kilometre across, 100-foot cliffs on the western side, the open side. A couple of times the waves were breaking over the cliff and the spray was carrying the kilometre across the island. So really, really rugged, you know, and atmospheric place, an incredible place to be, a great experience. I remember we were trying to get up the Pisa Range in central Otago, and the farmer said, yeah, go up that track there and you'll get on top. And the tops of those central Otago mountains are fantastic, you know, schist rock, tors, low forest. The forest is a couple of inches high and a couple of 100 years old. So beautiful landscape, sort of sub-Antarctic in a way, but we were there in summer. However, we set off up the track in a 4-wheel drive or a couple of 4-wheel drives, and we got right near the top, sort of an hour and a half later, and there was a big slip across the track that had wiped the track out. So what do? So we actually dug a wheel track along the top through the landslide, and we built a track with the schist rocks on the bottom. Took all the valuable gear out, took all the valuable people out, and then slowly and carefully drove across this very precarious track we'd made. So yeah, access is always an issue, sort of getting into the wilds. I was a director on a couple of them, and Tongariro being the first national park, it was really moving, being on the top of Tongariro at sunrise with the paramount chief, Sir Hepe Te Heuheu, and his priest, who became then Bishop of New Zealand, at the sunrise, and they were doing karakia, and that was like, you know, connections to the mountain, to the land. It was hairs on the back of the neck stuff. And then the big celebration, Sir Hepe leading his men in a fantastic haka at the chateau. And that also was kind of a revelation for me. I grew up in the South Island, small area, very few Maori people, you know, so the culture. So that, and national parks really got into that. We had Sir Tipene O'Regan clearing the way for us, so with Aoraki Mount Cook, which is kind of his mountain, and the people here, but he also went with us to meet the tangata whenua in some of those other parks, and that was great. Really enjoyed that. That was one of a trilogy, Antarctic Trilogy for Discovery Channel, and that was kind of the first co-production we'd done, one of the first international co-productions we'd done. Max Quinn was the producer, and the cameraman. He stayed over winter, and once a month he would go from Scott Base all the way out to Cape Crozier, where the emperor penguins are, and film for a short time. It was so cold they couldn't open their environmental housing to change the tape or change batteries were in a lead inside his jacket. So they had some real special challenges to overcome to be able to film there. Max made another overwinter film, and we made one more Antarctic show at the time, and Discovery Channel started those up. Your fresh breath can freeze your regulator open, and it did on our very first dive. And so my mate Andrew, we'd been down there for about 10 minutes, relaxing, filming, and then gouts of bubbles started appearing from his mouth, and we knew his regulator had frozen open. So I had to turn off the air supply to that, turn on his alternate regulator air supply, and we had to abort. So I was heading up behind him, about halfway up, so still about 30 feet to go, and my regulator started to free flow. So that was anxious, and just had to breathe from the bubbles gouting out of the regulator. So that was an anxious moment, and so it's intense, and it's cold. You know, after 10 minutes your fingers go cold, your toes go numb, and it's like diving on the edge. So it is, all your senses are kind of heightened, and it's fantastic. It was like the most intense experience of my life, besides seeing my kids born. There was a German scientist doing his PhD on the Bottlenose Dolphins in Milford Sound, Carsten Schneider, who went on to work for us. The very cool thing about that film was the technology that we cobbled together to be able to film the dolphins underwater. Ed Jowett was one of our divers and our storeman, a mechanic by trade, and he made camera mounts that could go on Carsten's aluminium dinghy. So we could cruise along, or he could cruise along with camera pointing ahead or sideways, and able to be panned around to follow the dolphin behaviour. So, you know, you could see the dolphins mating with their calves, the aggression, because the big males are very aggressive, and rubbing on the bottom. There's little gravelly patches, and they rub possibly to get rid of parasites or something, not really known, but they managed to capture some great behaviour.